Since we were stolen from Africa, there has been a persistent narrative about Black maternal unfitness to justify family separation. Unfortunately, the abolition of slavery didn't end the government separation of Black families. Instead, it created new systems like the family regulation system, which started with the orphan train in the 19th century, where non-white children were taken from families to work for white families. In the 20th century, the system exploded as an affront to Black liberation movements called to create a wide social safety net. In 1975, CAPTA creates the infrastructure for mandated reporting, deputizing educators and social workers with the police power to report children to this system. In 1997, the intersection of personal responsibility politics and drug war rhetoric would create one of the most devastating policies, the Adoption Safe Families Act. Today, the family regulation system continues to be more about socialization and surveillance than child protection.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CASA LA's Fireside Chat. I am Charity Chandler Cole, the CEO of CASA LA. At CASA LA, we organize the community to show up in life and in court to advocate for children and families in LA County's overburdened child welfare and juvenile justice systems. Through an intentional, restorative, and culturally responsive lens, we train a village of committed, consistent, and caring adults who provide equitable, life-affirming connections. Our vision is a Los Angeles County in which all children and families have equitable access to the resources and support they need to be whole and thrive. Our mission and vision cannot be accomplished until our children live in a world that is equitable and just. That's why we are committed to doing our part to address racial injustice in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems, and using this platform, our Fireside Chats, to bring communities and various stakeholders together to have real conversations about what's happening in the world of child welfare in LA County, with the hope of building awareness, informing our communities, activating a safe space for all, and strengthening our ability to advocate for our youth. Today, I have the privilege and honor of introducing you to a phenomenal group of people, all of whom have been impacted by the system in one way or another, and are dedicated to transforming the lives of our youth and families in LA County and beyond. We have Yani Bridges, who is a bail disruptor for the Bail Project LA. The majority of Yani's childhood was spent residing in facilities governed by the child welfare and juvenile justice systems in LA County. She has since worked in the last decade to organize communities around reforming systems with unjust policies and providing resource linkage to system impacted individuals. Yani sits on the board of directors for Inside Out Riders, and is an advisory board member for Better Youth and Creative Acts. She is also a founding member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. Tina Rios is a champion for child safety and a dedicated member of the Reimagine Child Safety Coalition and co-founder of the Reimagining Child Safety Advocacy Group. This group of 4 mothers with lived experience was honored with the 2021 Betty Fisher Award, a top honor given to her by LA County's Department of Public Health and the Domestic Violence Council. Her Native American ancestry guides her in her quest for quality child welfare for all. And Franco Vega, who is no stranger to our Fireside Chats, is the executive director of the Right Way Foundation, who does critical prevention work to help transition-age foster youth get and keep good jobs despite the overwhelming trauma they have endured through their lives, with a goal to end the pipelines that lead former foster youth to unemployment, homelessness, incarceration, and poverty. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us, and welcome to our Fireside Chat. For our audience, we will take a few questions towards the end if time permits. So please submit a question if you have one in the Q&A. So let's get into it. The child welfare system, since its inception, has intervened with and systematically separated children of color from their families, fragmenting communities and causing intergenerational trauma. From the establishment of Native American boarding schools and the removal of significant populations of American Indian and Alaska Native children and youth from their families, tribes, and native land, to the intentional targeting of Black and Brown communities during the war on drugs, which resulted in skyrocketing numbers of children of color being placed into foster care. Black and Indigenous children are still disproportionately represented at all stages of the child welfare system. Once in foster care, they experience increased placement disruptions, longer times to permanency, and more frequent reentry into foster care. Presently, 53% of all Black children and their parents will experience a child welfare investigation before the child's 18th birthday. The child welfare system is long overdue for substantial transformation. Families and communities of color have experienced the brunt of the failings and limitations present in current policy and practice. Transformation requires intentional efforts to disentangle poverty and child neglect and investments in communities to build robust, accessible, continual prevention services. Nationally, we are hearing the call to reimagine child safety and reimagine child welfare. So team, today we have the Reimagine Child Safety Coalition with us. Can you tell us a little bit about your coalition and what does Reimagine Child Safety mean?
Tina, I think you could take this question, Tina.
Hi, thank you, Charity. That is awesome. You hit every point, and it's just, we need to keep saying it until people get it. And there are a lot of people who don't get it, and that's why our coalition came together. We're about 30 plus organizations, champions, you know, and our coalition, I can go into what we believe. You know, we believe that the so-called child welfare system is operating exactly as it was designed, which is a racist family policing system. We know that Black and Indigenous children are being needlessly ripped away from their families and harmed by a system that claims to protect them. You talked about the historical aspect of that. What we believe also is that it creates intergenerational trauma for these families and undermines the fabric of the entire communities. The family policing system is irreparably rooted in white supremacy. The family policing system conspires with other fundamentally white supremacist systems, including criminal legal systems, education, healthcare, and housing, and others. We must fundamentally reimagine child safety. We come up with a list of demands that we launched and released and sent to the Board of Supervisors just maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was well received. We've gotten a good response. One of the motions that we made public comment on was to investigate the injury of a child, a foster child, who was put in a coma by his foster parent. And it was this motion was passed unanimously by the all-women Board of Supervisors. And we were just so happy. I was able to actually meet Holly Mitchell the next day. And we talked about this, and she calls on all of us to reimagine safety, but take the lead. She wants to hear those who witness the injustice. Those like, we have many lawyers in our group that witness the injustices that are happening. And she calls upon them, and she calls upon us with lived experience to join her and reimagine, and join her and the Board of Supervisors and the legislators in reimagining child safety. And that's what we did. And we have our list of demands that we can touch on, but you kind of touched on a lot of them in your intro. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Frank or Yani, would you like to add anything to that? Or did Tina cover it? Can you go ahead, Frank? I see you on mic.
Oh yeah, no, she pretty much covered it. You know, it's just a bunch, it's a large amount of folks who work in this field across the nation. It's not just LA. We have folks from New York that chime in, folks from Oakland, and we're here to redesign this system. Well, destroy it, break it, you know, and repair it, you know. Well, no, let's not say repair it, because you can't, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, you know. But yeah, we got to come up with a better system for our beautiful babies.
Thank you. And a term that's often used with the coalition, and I do want to put it out there that CASA LA did sign on to be a part of the Reimagine Child Safety Coalition very proudly. And, you know, for us, we signed on because we, you know, are ready to reckon with the histories of our past. And we realize the fact that our child welfare systems, you know, whether we like it or not, or want to admit it or not, were rooted in white supremacy and in racism. And those elements and the remnants of that still exist today. And we have such an amazing dynamic platform to address it. We have a platform where we not only get to, show up in the lives of young people and help them and support them and fight for their educational and health justice, but we get to show up in court and we get to provide trauma-informed and culturally responsive reports on behalf of these young people and humanize them, humanize their experiences, humanize their families, really look at how to help the child by helping their family and really, correcting some of the injustices that took place in our history and today. And so we're very proud to be a part of this coalition with you all. Within the coalition, the word family regulation system is mentioned a lot, and people may wonder, what does that mean? Can anyone break down what, the child regulation system, family regulation system means exactly for those that may not be aware?
Family regulation system, it's, I don't know, I would describe it as a family policing system. You're brought into this system and you're put under this microscope by the social workers who often are biased. And your child's detained from you, and you go into this system that can take years to get out of. And a lot of people don't realize that it's not only impacting children who are put in foster care, but a lot of biological parents and caregivers and extended family members. You find yourself in these systems, and it's almost impossible to get out. And so the data says that there's so many children being impacted, but it just goes beyond that. It goes generations. There will be generations of families who sometimes have given up on regaining custody of their children. Because it's almost impossible as it is now. And one thing I wanted to say is, and I forgot to mention, is that as our coalition launched, just to show the readiness of leaders and legislators to uptake these demands and to end the harm that's being caused by DCFS in Los Angeles and worldwide. Under pressure, we feel that even though it's stated that he wasn't under pressure, the director, Bobby Cagle, resigned. And that just shows that the readiness. And so we want to put into place a system that is not a policing system, that is a nurturing system, that is a system that is designed to help families thrive. And I don't feel we're alone, and I feel like our coalition is just beginning and just growing, and we have many powerhouses. So Franco or anyone else, do you have anything to add to that? Sorry.
Well, yeah, I'll make mine shorter. The regulation system is thinking that certain folks knows how to raise our kids better than we know how. And if we don't raise them like up to their standards, they find a magical way of how to take our kids away and start making a lot of money off of this, And I'm gonna be brutally honest. I think the foster care system is a jobs program. It creates a lot of high-paying jobs for folks and good retirement pensions and stuff like that. And I don't see, my data since '95 shows nothing good is coming out of the foster care system when they emancipate, So how can we just don't fix the families in the home, So that's my short answer to this family regulation system. They think they can raise our beautiful babies better than we can. And that's not true at all.
And yeah, I feel like Charity was coming after me next. But legit, I really don't have so much to add to what Tina and Franco beautifully said. But I think that one of the things that, because I've actually had a long history with DCFS, my situation is very intergenerational. My mother was in foster care. I was in foster care, and then subsequently my daughter ended up in foster care for a short period of time. And what I find is, like, I'm a Black woman, and I have a Black mother, and my daughter's Black, and what I find is that we parent differently than what the system expects us to parent, and I find that when social workers, when I engage with social workers, whether it's a training or whether I'm being investigated, I'm like, you write what I say, you know what I mean? This is what it is. I'm gonna talk to you. I'm gonna talk to my daughter in front of you exactly how I talk to her in front of everybody else. I'm not sugarcoating anything. I remember going to court and them telling me, my lawyer telling me, when I was a parent, experiencing the foster care as a parent, or the child welfare system, she told me that you need to put on your Emmy Award winning best parent act. And I said, I'm not acting for nothing. Like, I'm not acting for anything. I'm a good parent, period. So if they can come in this house and they can check everything that they need to check, they're gonna find that she has all of her needs met. They're gonna find that she's even further than that. But I think that there's this feeling as Black parents that we have to be something outside of ourselves in order to meet the standard that the system has created, which is racist.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And I think that's why so many of our Black and Brown and Indigenous, community gets entangled in the child welfare system because of expectations that are set by the dominant, the dominant group in our society, which are, white people, unfortunately. And when I'm looking at Reimagine child welfare, I'm thinking of, if I wanted to really transform the child welfare system, what do we need to do to actually do that? On one end, we do have children that, are being abused, do need that support, but we unfortunately have a system that cannot adequately respond to these young people because there's so many other people that enter the system. We have 88%, and we've thrown this statistic out so many times, 88% of our families enter the system because of issues of poverty and neglect, with only 12% that are entering the system because of abuse. And unfortunately, those 12% aren't able to be adequately supported because we have so many other families infiltrating the system. And so when we say reimagine, child welfare, I'm thinking, what can we, being an abolitionist, a proud abolitionist, what can we do to break down the system that currently exists in the way that it exists and recreate something that prioritizes prevention, that, focuses on racial equity, realizing that if so many families enter the system because of poverty, and that neglect stems from poverty. And then when we look at the socioeconomic factors, we look at oppression, we look at so many limitations and burdens and barriers imposed on Black and Brown people daily, regardless of how, tight we pull up our bootstraps and tie them up. We still know that because of who we are, how we look, that we are denied access to opportunities, to jobs, to employment, to the housing market at a higher rate than other groups. And so how do we look at the reasons that lead to poverty? How do we look at the intentional dismantling of our families? When we have, our fathers enter the criminal justice system because of marijuana or because of charges that other groups would not, go to jail for. And as a result, we're having single parent households, we're having families being forced into situations where they have to survive that lead them to incarceration and lead their children into the foster care system. The response to that isn't create more foster beds. It's not create more beds in prison, but it's say, what do we do to prevent this from happening? How do we really reckon with the histories of our past by really looking at addressing racial equity, having some accountability, all together, and really prioritizing prevention and what it looks like. And in the letter, the coalition sent to the Board of Supervisors, you said the board has already acknowledged the disproportionate harms that carceral and surveillance systems have on communities of color, and has taken bold action to begin remedying such harms and to provide alternatives to criminalization and incarceration. The family regulation system is no different, and it is critical that it too is included in these efforts. We recognize that the board has created the Office of Equity within DCFS and passed the Reimagining Safety, Health, and Human Services for the County's Children and Families motion to address racial inequities and systemic racism in the family regulation system. However, Los Angeles County must take bolder action to protect families from the surveillance and overreach of the family regulation system. So with that said, what type of bolder action would you like to see happen? And maybe this is a good time to go into the list of demands. There are quite a few, and so maybe we can break down, a few of them at this moment. I do see a comment in the chat, but let's maybe get through some of these demands, because so there's some of us who may not fully understand or be aware of, what the demands are, why they exist. We may be, advocates for certain precautions, the way we see them to be put in place. So I think it's good to maybe, demystify some of the thoughts that are out there. We'll start with Tina. I know your number 8 is normally yours, and we actually have a question in reference to number 8 in our Q&A. And the question is, Reimagine, I support so much with what you do. And thank you so much, Ashley. Good to see you on. I struggle with the desire to end drug testing mothers and newborn infants, as I've worked closely with many infants born exposed and believe they fervently need eyeballs on them to ensure their ability to thrive. This testing allows to identify who might need resources. Can you further explain your stance? So one, Tina, can you go into the demand for number 8 and then maybe answer that question?
Okay, so our demand for number 8 is eliminating drug testing by DCFS and hospital staff for pregnant, laboring, and postnatal people and infants in hospitals. This doesn't mean that a doctor can see something in a child and needs to, help that child. It doesn't remove that responsibility. But what it does is it removes drug testing from hospitals. What happens for low income families, mostly those who are Medi-Cal, it's an automatic test. But say you have a private insurance or you go to a different hospital that doesn't automatically test you. They will ask you, do you want to be tested? And you have the right to say no. But in many hospitals, that serve low-income families who are disproportionately Black, Brown, and Indigenous, the test is automatic, and people are their infants are being removed from them because they had maybe marijuana in their test trace amounts. And so this is just another way that the DCFS removes Black and Indigenous children, infants just born from their parent. But it also deters parents from seeking prenatal care because they're concerned. And I wanted to say, Yani, no matter what you would have done, your house would have been sparkling, it doesn't matter. These social workers come after you, and it's nothing you could have done or nothing you can do will keep them in the current state. So we're trying to eliminate that. We're trying to make it safer.
Definitely, I agree. And Franco was actually involved in my case, and he came to my court date. And he, he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of community members and CBOs who came to my court date or came because my case was a LAPD DCFS overlap. And so some people came to the police station, Congress members came, or a Congress member came, and I think that there were so many eyes on my case, but also there were so many lies in my case on community members, right? And so if I were to go and say alone, like for my mom, when she was going through it, she didn't have anybody as support. She didn't have a support network. So when they lied on her, it was easy for them to get away with it. Whereas with my case, it was just like, okay, like all 16 of these people lied, all 16 of these people were, community threats. All 16 of these people were violent or aggressive. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Tina.
So Tina, for number 8, basically what you're saying is you're asking for equity. You're asking for equity in the testing process. You're not saying if a mother or father, whomever comes in, clearly out of their mind on drugs, that they shouldn't be testing. You're saying that if you're not testing someone that has private insurance in another location that may not fit my description, then you shouldn't be testing me either. And that we just want equity in the drug testing process. Being poor, having Medi-Cal, and receiving social services is not an automatic right for you to infringe on my rights to drug test me. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
That does sound pretty bold, and that sounds like something we can I think our Board of Supervisors should support. Let's get into a few more of these demands because we only have 30 minutes and there's quite a few. And I want to, thank you, Ashley, make sure everyone understands. I mean, Franco, what's your favorite one? What's your demand?
Well, since I'm a jobs program, mine is universal basic income. I firmly believe that poverty is the way that this system attacks our family and separates them. If you have a dirty home or cockroaches and stuff like that, they're thinking that you're not a good fit parent, and so I would love financial support. It's cheaper to give the family cash than to take them and put them into another system, and then we have to pay some job folks, So that's my firm belief. I want to tackle the poverty issue. Real quick on Yani. Yani is 100%. I think this is the reason I got into this coalition. It was through Yani's case. We know Yani and how great of a mother she is. We know her beautiful daughter. Yeah. We know how smart her beautiful daughter is. I mean, good Lord. And when this came about, when we got the call at 10 p.m. from the police station and 2 a.m. from congresswomen and blah, blah, blah. And then we went in front of the judge and we had to fight. And still we had to put on that mask she's talking about. And we had all of us there championing for her. If she's 100% right, I can only imagine what her mom went through because she didn't have none of us. Her mom didn't have none of us. Like a lot of other folks, Tina didn't have none of us when she was fighting her cases. So, I think that poverty is the real issue, in my opinion. Domestic violence, we need to change how we treat victims of domestic violence. Sometimes a mother is taking a beating so her kid won't take that beating. And next thing you know, she's getting the kid removed. That's honor. That's not her kids shouldn't be snatched up. So don't let me get on that one. I'm very passionate about these.
Please do.
This is just, our system is just whack, racist system. Come on. And I want to look at the civilian oversight. We need a civilian oversight commission to decide if we need to remove this kid from this home. They're not doing it correctly. So let's bring in some of us community members, our churches, local CBOs. And like sometimes I hear the Native Americans do it. They make decisions on their kids, do we keep them, we need to do the same thing, especially.
There's actually a WIC code in place for Native tribal families. And so, Franco.
Yeah, we need that for Black families badly. So that's my end.
Yes. And
all the love to Franco Right Way Foundation. Thank you. I don't have a favorite. I looked at this demands list and I was like, Jesus, like this is a prayer answered, right? I don't really have a favorite, but based on my intergenerational contact of DCFS in my family, I'm gonna highlight 1 and 3. And because that was, law enforcement overlap was how I was taken away. My mother was 14 years old in the juvenile justice system with a mother who was struggling with addiction. And so at 11 years old, she had to go out on her own. And then eventually she found a foster home she ended up in foster care and began having children at 14. I was her 4th child by 18 years old. Right. And her 2 of my older siblings were already in the system. She had a history herself being a foster youth and then being a teen parent and having 2 children in the system. She hid me for about 4 years. She raised me. I can tell you that when I was being raised by my mother was the safest that I ever felt in my life. Right. And there was an incident in the home that had nothing to do with my mom. And the police came out and they did their investigation. Everything was clear. They checked me. Everything was fine. And they said they were leaving. I think they came back a few hours later and said, because you have children in the system, we don't feel comfortable leaving this child here with you, even though you weren't involved in the incident. So if it's not safe for one, it's not safe for all. So they put me in the system. And I can tell you that after I was removed, that's when I experienced abuse. In fact, it was recorded that there were 9 accounts of at least 9 accounts of severe neglect and abuse, right? And I remember, I have terrible memories of what happened in the system. And all I wanted to do was go back home, and my mom didn't deserve that, right? In hindsight, looking at all the advocacy work that we've been doing to reform things, and then looking at that list, I'm just like, LAPD was involved in her situation as well, but also when DCFS comes knocking on your door, right? They don't Mirandize you, right? They don't tell you what your rights are. They don't, you just feel like, I know that as a community, they're like, well, do we open the door? If we don't open the door, they're gonna take our baby. If we do open the door, they're gonna find a reason to take our baby, right? And so how do we protect families, right, from the gate, right? Because by the time that they even get to council, so back to number 3, by the time they even get to council, like statements have already been made. DCFS has already come out and done whatever damage, and how do they recover from that? And so again, Franco was in court when the judge read out in front of my daughter, right, in front of my 9-year-old. This was almost 2 years to date. And the judge said, based on the LAPD report and the DCFS report, she said, you are a monster, right? She said that your daughter is afraid of you, and you need help, right? And my daughter began to cry. And she said, yeah. She looked at my daughter and she said, yeah, you need to hear this about your mom. Nobody else is going to tell you this about your mom, but I have to tell you, right, Franco? Right? This is what happened, right? And my daughter is crying, and we go to the parking lot and we ask her, Naima, why were you crying? And she said, because I never told the police that. I never told them that I was afraid of you. I never told them that I was scared. I never told them that you were hurting me. But the judge took it where she wanted to take it because of that report.
That just, boils my blood, and I'm so sorry to hear that. I've known you for 8+ years, and I've known Bean since she was a baby, and you're an amazing mother. And if no one's told you that recently, you are an amazing mother, and you would take her everywhere. There wasn't a place you wouldn't go where she wasn't by your side, because you're so protective and loving of your child. And, it's not okay for us to put that judgment on another parent without really understanding the context of their lives, what they're going through, really having a conversation with them, but then to drag the child in and have them hear that and witness that, that's not okay. That's not okay. And, we need to change that. We need to hold our judges accountable. We need to hold our leaders accountable. And there are certain things you can't do and you shouldn't say, because it's causing so much harm and traumatizing our children. And you mentioned something earlier, Yani, and you said, how to, prevent it from happening in the first place. And I would say, I do have a favorite. I like them all. I think you need to implement them all, but I do have a favorite because it ties so much to a lot of the work I've been doing even before coming to CASA. So as a commissioner with the Children and Families, we formed a racial justice committee last summer when George, excuse me, I have a terrible cold today, when George Floyd was brutally murdered. And we stood up and, in that meeting and said, Black foster youth lives matter. And we as a commission can no longer sit here and show up to these cute little meetings with these fancy little titles and hear reports from people with every kind of PH, everything letter behind their name. And we're not doing anything actively to address the injustices that are happening. And so, in our child welfare system. And so as a result, we created the Racial Justice Committee with the goal to be intentional about really addressing at the root, at the core, how are children and families even getting wrapped up in the system? And so we decided to really focus on mandated reporting, because we're looking at how do we even get into the system to begin with? And there'll be a huge, summit happening in February, and we're doing a lot of digging. And fortunately, we've had so much collaboration from so many of our partners, within the county, within the community, to really focus on this finally and have some resolve. And what we're seeing, going through all the mandatory reporting trainings, I recently went through the state training, the general one, and oh my goodness, it's not a mandatory reporting training. It is a superhero training. It comes with the cape and all. And it's ridiculous because the way our families are portrayed, the way abuse is communicated, and how there's so much confusion between abuse and neglect, it leads our reporters, our teachers, our law enforcement, our healthcare professionals to actively engage in reporting as much as often on our families. They're told not to investigate. They're told not to ask clarifying questions. They're threatened that if you don't report a case, whether you believe something is happening or not, if you even have an inkling, you need no proof, that if you don't report, you can lose your license, you can go to jail. There's so many threats made for mandated reporters to report that they are reporting left and right. And mind you, on one hand, there's the threat of losing licenses and incarceration, but on the other hand, it says very clearly and blatantly that if you're wrong, if you make a mistake, you have immunity.
Or if you make something up.
Or if you make something up, you have immunity and we will protect you. And this hits so close to me because when I go to my healthcare professional, when I go to a teacher, when I'm told to trust law enforcement, how can I actively do that? Even when we talked about domestic violence earlier, Franco, how could we do that when the people we're going to and looking to for support, for help, are in positions to report anything they see? And mind you, a lot of what they're seeing are issues that stem from poverty and neglect and not abuse. Yani, you were able to hear part of a story that happened to me recently, but I'm going to share it here because this is why mandatory reporting is so harmful to our communities. When I had graduated college, you know, after going through the foster care system, the juvenile justice system, experiencing so much torment and abuse while in the systems, I finally got my college degree. I was in a position to support my child. I got a new job as working with a fiscal sponsor, and I had an amazing portfolio of clients. I had LA County as one of my clients. I had LAC USC as one of my clients. I was one of the mothers who, you know, showed up every day for my nephew and son in class. I was the PTA mom of the year. I actively volunteered in my children's classrooms. I was so active and so loving, and there's not one person that could tell you that I didn't love my son and my nephew. And I had just got with my new boo thing, who's my husband now for almost, you know, we've been together like 10 years, but he's been, you know, such an amazing, you know, force in my son and my nephew's life since, you know, coming into their lives. And at the time, my nephew was about 6 years old, and him and his mother more so, you know, we've since moved on from there, would actively do little things to figure out how she can get him back. And she since got him back the right way without trying to, you know, use manipulation and other things, because she was so tired. She's like, let's just make up something to get him taken from Charity so he can get back to me. And I sympathize and feel. But one of the things, my nephew went to school and told his teacher, who, mind you, I see all the time. I signed up to volunteer in her class. I trusted. I would actively tell them, if anything's wrong, you're feeling any type of way, go to your teacher. You can trust them. They're here to support us. He told her that my husband threw a grand piano at him, and she called and reported. She didn't give me a call to follow up, to ask clarifying questions. She didn't give me the benefit of the doubt to even ask if I had a large grand piano in my tiny apartment at the time. Someone she knew, someone I thought she respected. And as a result of that, I had social workers show up to my house. I had law enforcement show up to my house. I was so humiliated by having people come to my house and tell me I had to immediately take my son and nephew and my brand new 8-year-old twin boys to my client, LAC USC, where they would then be stripped naked and searched to see if they were being abused, to see if there were any signs of abuse, because a 6-year-old said, or 7-year-old said, a grand piano was thrown at him. And while there, as a mom, when you take your kids to the doctors, what do? You help them get undressed. You tell them it's going to be okay. You tell them there's a scary stranger that's going to probably come in here, but it's okay. They're here to protect you. They're here to help you, here to take care of your health. I was told to leave the room. I couldn't even be in the room while they undressed my children, my babies, 2 of which were in a stroller. I was forced to stand on the other side of that wall while my children were traumatized and stripped naked and searched because of an allegation that a grand piano was thrown. Our mandated reporting laws right now give everyone permission to have open season on people like me. Yes. If I were white, going to that same school at Playa Vista, the same school where these mothers went to school every day and cussed their kids out in front of everybody, no one called anyone on them, no one on them. But the second they had an opportunity to tie my Black life to neglect or abuse, because we're in a society where we've been conditioned to think that this is what we do, this is how we treat our children, this is how we show up, and that to protect herself, that she needed to report this. And no due diligence was given to me as a parent. And so that's one story, but we have over 90% of cases being reported to the hotline are unsubstantiated, which means 90% of reports being made to the hotline, these are families who are experiencing trauma, who are having law enforcement and social workers show up to their door, who are being humiliated. I had to kindly ask my boss to take LACUSC off my portfolio because I could no longer show up. Finally got to a place in my life where I had some success, where I was doing it. Your girl had a portfolio of clients and life was good, but I had to, not only could I no longer show my face in LACUSC, I ended up having to leave the job altogether because I was just so humiliated. My husband and I got into so many arguments over where to place blame that shouldn't have been placed anywhere because nothing actually happened. Mm-hmm. My poor little nephew had to experience his auntie being upset and frustrated over something he said, and us taking some of that out on him. Like, why would you say that? Why would you do that? And he's just like, I don't know, I'm 7. I just, say crazy things. I don't expect people to, show up at your house investigating, it's a grand piano. I'm common sense for a 7-year-old, but imagine how many families are policed daily. How many families have to experience that trauma and abuse? Whether the case is substantiated or not, the harm is done. My baby will never forget. My 16-year-old brought it up the other day. He will never forget having to undress naked while he had just started going through puberty at a time of his life where he's so vulnerable. He's like, don't touch me at all. And so if I were to pick one, placing a moratorium on detentions related to general neglect, because our mandated reporting laws are so trash and the way we implement them, the way we interpret them are so harmful to our communities, that would be the very first one I would like to see our board of supervisors and our leaders, people in positions of power to address immediately. Tina.
Okay, that is awesome what you shared. It's just, the shame is, these systems use shame. And that's a very powerful thing. It keeps people from reporting, keeps people from seeking safety. My experience is a little bit different. And this goes to show that these are racist systems. Because in my experience, the other parent was abusing our child. The school, he was abusing them and the school witnessed it. It took parents to speak out on behalf of my child in order for the school to actually report suspected child abuse, because the other parent is actually white and I'm Native American. I was asking for help. And there was several mandated reports of sexual abuse and a lot of different things. Did they believe me? Did they believe my own child? No, because I look this way and he looks that way. And my son even reported, a mandated reporter came with me to a police station and said, we want to report suspected child abuse on this child. And the white male officer said, I'm not going to take that report. Even though this was a mandated reporter who was Black, Indigenous, somehow they assumed that we're working in cahoots. But my son at the time, he was 9 years old. He wanted to go he wants to be a police officer. So he's like, can I go in? So we ended up going into a police station and he's pointing to the wall and looking at the pictures and saying, I want to be a police officer. I want to be up on that wall. And I'm like, yes, you can be one day. So eventually we went into this room. It happened to go into this interview room for children, even though the police officer said, no, we're not going to interview you. We're not going to take this report. We don't believe you. There is no issue here. Somehow, by God's grace, we ended up in the interview room. In that room, there was a mandated reporter with me who never left the sight of me and my child. In that room, I looked the other way to not show that I was influencing my child in any way. I held my tears. I said nothing. They asked my child, has your father hurt you? Does he hurt you? They said, yes. He said, yes, when I was 5, my father locked me in a dark room and didn't feed me. At this time, then they said, well, what about now? And he said, quiet. Yes, my dad hurts me really bad. He puts his hand to my mouth and nose, and I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. When he does that, I tell him to stop. Just outside the police station was a protest for George Floyd. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. You can hear them. The police officer got angry and refused to believe my 8-year-old son and said I must have coached him. The mandated reporter said she did not. I've been with her. Previously to this day, he was withheld from her for several months in a secluded cabin in the forest. So this goes to show it's not always about the mandated reporter. It's about racism. It's about racism. It's about who you are. And so to this day, my child is still with this person that suffocates him, because I am Native American and he is white, and he is, there's implicit bias within our police state. So I wanted to share that. Sorry.
I'm gonna send my love to you. My heart is very heavy. This is my first time meeting you or virtually meeting you, and I'm so sorry, because as a mother and you know, as a parent, I know we all, everyone on this call can attest to, it is, you know, all you want to do is protect your child, and when you cannot, when the system comes in and harms your child and you can't do anything about it, there is no, like, there's not a feeling worse than that to me, you know. I don't know that I've experienced a deeper pain. So sending my love to you.
We need to move from being mandated reporters to mandated supporters in identifying support for our families, trust in our families, especially our families that are Black, Brown, and Indigenous. You know, reimagining child safety and child welfare for me, you know, also includes humanizing us, you know, looking at us as people that are worthy of being good parents, that love their children, that, you know, will fight tooth and nail, you know, for their babies. And that, yes, we may have some shortcomings because we live in a society where we're, you know, striving to survive day in and day out. And mind you, it's not always poverty. It's not always money. As a Black woman today who still, you know, who has it, you know, somewhat going on and have it together, I still, you know, have moments of being powerless, where I'm so vulnerable, where I know that any day, like today, I live in fear every day, regardless of what I do for a living right now, what I do as an advocate. I know that someone can come in and take my babies right now if they wanted to, because of our policies that exist. And so reimagining child welfare means Charity, Yani, Tina, Franco, all of us never having to wake up wondering if my baby can be taken from me, if my life can be upended because someone makes a claim, unsubstantiated or not, because someone thinks, because of how I look and who I am, that I'm not worthy of being a parent, that I'm not worthy of even being given the benefit of the doubt, that I'm not worthy of being called and asked a question. I'm not worthy of making decisions for myself and my family, decisions that may not correspond with your thoughts and ideas around how I should show up as an authentic person in this world and in this society. That's not okay. And so, Tina, I'm so sorry. And I know you're still fighting that. And, you know, a lot of that stems, you know, there's so many children right now whose mothers have, you know, fled and tried to get support because of domestic violence, and their children were taken as a result because they failed to protect the way the law is written. Even though they've left the home, they went to shelters, they tried to seek help, but because they failed to protect as how it's defined in our system, their children are taken and removed, and that's just not okay. And we have to do something about that. Franco, I know your hand was raised earlier. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, no, it was a question in the Q&A of Tim asked, do you think I believe sexual abuse, if that should be removal of a kid, if the mother and father knowingly is sexually abusing the child, yeah, remove the kid out.
So let's answer that question. The question from Tim is, do you think there are any circumstances under which a child should be removed from their parents' care? And that's what Franco's answering. Go ahead.
When the child is in immediate danger.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's supposed to be, right? A detention is because it's supposed to be because a child is in immediate danger, right? And that, I agree, sexual abuse, you know what I mean? I agree, like physical abuse.
And then I'm gonna take it a step further. I want those folks prosecuted. I want them prosecuted because I got a lot of youth in my program that's been sexually abused, and their perpetrator, their pervert, is still on the streets. Never got arrested, but they got removed from the home.
And probably further abuse. It's not often that you know, many of my peers, it's not often that they get a good home, right? It's very rare, right? It's very, very, very rare. And so oftentimes the child is removed from the home, which could be a good or a bad thing, typically bad, but removed from the home to experience even further abuse, and then at 18 spit out, and they say they have to fend for themselves. But it's like, no, you are the parent now. You have to now parent this child that you took away from their parents. So, you know, I know with my experience, it was like, you know, this trauma, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm going through puberty now. All these hormones are going on, and I'm also traumatized, right? And so I'm fighting in high school, and then I end up in the juvenile justice system. And that often happens. We talk about the foster care to prison pipeline, right? And so how do we make sure that people have the supports that they need? And oftentimes, I don't know what the numbers are. Let me just be clear. I do not know what they are, but 90% of the time, I would say kids do not need to be removed from their homes, right? Kids do not need to be removed from the homes that they just need support. And I want to go even further to add to what Charity was saying. And it's like most parents, every parent has made mistakes, right? And so I want to add that, you know, when a parent makes a mistake, how do we respond as a community to them, right? How do we respond as a community? Oftentimes people can recover and say, look, I yelled at you, or I did this, or I did that. This was a mistake. How can I fix it, right? And open dialogue, and to help strengthen the relationships between the parent and child, so they can move past that mistake and work through, not move past, but work through that mistake, right? And so I don't even believe that the system provides space for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And I want to live in a world where I can resume telling my children, you know, because I've stopped doing this since that happened. I want to be able to resume telling my children, you can trust your teachers. You can tell them anything. I used to tell them anything you don't want to tell mommy. You can tell your teacher, you can tell the doctor, you can tell all these people. So ignorant, you know, not realizing that, you know, the harm that could ensue as a result of our policies. I want to live in a world, I want to reimagine a world where, you know, in Taiji, I see you in there. How did, you know, the Gabriel Fernandez happen? I want to live in a world where we have a system in place that prioritizes and focuses on children that are actually being abused, children that actually need to be removed from their households because of abuse, because of sexual trauma. Unfortunately, our system does not allow for that. And so these cases will continue to occur because we have so many people in the system that do not need to be there. We have so many out-of-home placements where we could, if we really cared about prioritizing prevention, prioritizing racial equity, helping to heal and restore our communities, then we will make sure that we provide support for families that actually need it, not forcing support for families that don't need it, but providing support for families that actually need it while their children are in the home. It is more traumatizing to remove a child from their home and put them in an environment that they're unfamiliar with. That's scary. I experienced more trauma and more abuse not being in my home, not in my home, not being a whole gangbanger, selling drugs at 14 in my community. I experienced more abuse in the foster care system, and had anyone in the space of child protection, of child safety, asked, what do you need? What does your family need? Why are you doing these things to survive? And looking at some of the things we do to survive. I say this all the time. No one wakes up wanting to steal or destroy or cause violence or experience violence. No one. But when we're put into situations where we're forced to survive, we're forced to adjust, we're forced to adapt to oppressive conditions, this is what you get. And let's be clear, it's by design. It is by design, because to Frankel's point earlier, it's very profitable to oppress Black and brown people. Because as long as we have these systems that need to continue to exist, we'll continue to employ them, we'll continue to find ways to tax folks, and we'll continue to fund system after system that constantly oppresses our communities. And so the only way to really get rid of it is to abolish it and reimagine something else. It's not say do away with social workers. It's not say do away with a child safety, system. It's saying what we have right now is so terrible. It's just not working, and there's no way to reform it. There's no way to change it. We just need to start over. And with that said, let's use these last 3 minutes with, you mentioned earlier, Tina, that DCFS director Bobby Cagle did resign. And so with, change comes opportunity. What are we looking for in the next DCFS director of DCFS? Like, what would that look like to set us on the trajectory of really reimagining child safety? I can give you my answer, but what would you like to see in the new director?
I went back and asked my DV support group, a coalition member, Shepherd's Door, a group of women said, one thing they said though, is that the social workers have too much power. And if they like you, then you're good. If they don't like you, then you're not. Usually they join with your personality. And a lot of times if they're white, they'll like the white person, so forth. There's a lot of bias against women. But for the leader of DCFS, maybe it shouldn't be one person. Maybe it should be several people. We really have to reimagine what that looks like. Our imagination is limitless. One of the persons should have lived experience as a foster youth, not just being adopted as an infant, but as a youth, as going through the system, and a parent who has had their child removed, because then they would think twice how that feels. They would know. Bobby Cagle is someone who's proud to say about this story that when he was a director in a different state, how he went to visit a parent and removed the child that day after witnessing the child almost go towards a propane fueled heater. He proudly lifted her up, rescued her, and then ordered a car to remove her from that child. The parent looked paranoid. A person with lived experience would say that child did not touch the heater. She's clearly could use resources for a good heater, an electric heater, but also, think about it, really think about what services to provide. So someone who's with lived experience is most important. That's my favorite demand is number 9, because as long as you have an oversight of people with lived experience, you're good, because all these demands can be put in place, but what does it matter if they're not put into action?
Can I add to that? That was actually going to be something that I spoke to. I think that, yes, there is oversight, but in every aspect of the decision-making process that DCFS has, there should be someone there, right? And so there should be a parent partner, there should be someone in court, similar to a CASA, there should be someone with lived experience in every aspect of the system from the investigation on, you know what I mean? And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Richard Wexler in the comments, you said exactly what I was going to say, because I would like to see someone come in that is ready to really address prevention, who's ready to call out the policies and processes that harm our community, someone that's from LA County, born and raised and experienced the system would be preferred, and someone that's willing to say, hey, I'm willing to look at our budget, figure out how we can actively advocate and fight to reallocate these resources into the community so they can be the ones to provide this, the services to our children and families, and to actively work to reduce the number of children that are in care and make it smaller. Richard put in the comments, what did he put? DCFS likes to claim that it's the nation's largest child welfare system. I hope the Board of Supervisors will hire someone who wants to make it the smallest. I 100% agree. And so we need someone to actively come in to not figure out how to get more funding, to hire more social workers and provide more services, but what do we need to do so the village, the community, who are in the trenches day in and day out, providing services, have proximity to the community, can be the ones to deliver those services and reduce our Department of Children and Family Services so they can respond to children that are actually experiencing abuse. That's what I would like to see. And that's a challenge if you're listening, elected officials, board of supervisors, everyone out there. You have
no pressure. Just do the right thing.
Oh, pressure applied. Mark my pressure applied.
No pressure. Just do the right thing.
And on that note, we'll go ahead. We're 2 minutes over, but thank you all so much for your time, for your energy, for your vulnerability and transparency. I appreciate you all so much, and thank you everyone for joining our fireside chat.
Thank you.